Good morning, everyone, and thanks so much for joining us today. My name is David Levinson of Nedgroup Investments, and welcome to our second Responsible Investment webinar of 2021. As of yesterday, we had over 800 people registered for our event, so as you can imagine, we are incredibly thrilled with the interest you have shown in our event here today. The title of our webinar for today is Diversity and Inclusion and Why It is Good for Everybody. So as you can imagine, this is often an emotive and sometimes uncomfortable discussion. So I approach today with a sense of nervousness, but also a sense of optimism and an open heart and mind to listen and learn to both Tracy Davies and Fadzi Wandi, who we have chatting later on today. We are shaped so much by our own stories and experiences. I don't think we can discount the context from where we come from. So I really encourage you today to do a bit of self-reflection on yourself, as well as your colleagues, and at a macro level, your organizations and society as a whole. So for example, my name is David. I was born in 1980 South Africa. I grew up in middle-class, predominantly white suburbia of Pietermaritzburg. I think I was Jewish for the first 5 years of my life. My siblings and I, unbeknown to us, became Catholic at about 5 or 6 years old. And now I'm just exploring life. And I guess the story here is we are shaped so much by our own experiences, our own sort of lens on the world, and how we relate to the world. So again, the overwhelming message today is self-reflection. So I encourage you to explore your own journeys, as well as appreciate where your colleagues have come from as well. And then, of course, how we look to move this discussion forward. And the agenda for today is I'm going to, for the first sort of 15 minutes or so, talk you through our Responsible Investment Research Report. We presented on our 2019 report last year. We are in the throes of completing our 2021 report. So I'm just going to give you some of the initial findings, and I'm going to tilt today's discussion very much along the diversity line. So we have included in our research report, which looks at asset managers in South Africa and globally, what they're doing in terms of diversity and inclusion at home, as well as in the companies that they invest in. And then for the second sort of 20 minutes, from about 10:20 to 10:40, we will welcome Tracy Davies from Just Share. Who will be chatting a little bit about shareholder activism in South Africa and a lot of the work that she has done in terms of diversity on the listed companies locally. And then we welcome Fadzi Wandi, who's from the United Nations. She's dialing in from Geneva, so fingers crossed technology is on our side. And she is a diversity and inclusion strategist. And she speaks quite wonderfully about why diversity does not always necessarily result in inclusion. So looking very much forward to both those discussions later on this morning. Sorry, I did skip a slide there. I'll go back for a second. So there should be a survey currently up on your screens. This is on the self-reflection agenda, or at least the idea for today is looking both internally at your own organizations. What are you doing in terms of inclusion? And inclusion is along both demographic and gender lines for today. And both of these will come to the fore in our discussions with both Tracy and Fadzi. I think this survey should be up for the next sort of 10 minutes or so, so take your time in terms of filling it out. And I think at the end of my 20-minute session now, I'll give some of the survey results and findings. So to begin with, we hosted our first Responsible Investment Summit. I think it was the back end of January. It might have even been early February this year. It had a very environmental tilt to it. So today we're focusing very much on the social side. In investment circles, you'll hear people talk about ESG, so environmental, social, and governance. So these were the speakers we had back at our last summit. Clem Santa spoke about climate change, Mark Mobius about ESG in investing, particularly in emerging markets. We had Roy Bagattini, the CEO of Woolworths, chatting about sustainability in a corporate sphere. And then we had Peter Ullenbroek from Share Action in the UK, who does quite similar work actually to Tracy Davies here in South Africa in terms of their shareholder activism. And the one glaring thing that we do see from the slide is it is a very white male panel that we had last time around. This was not by design. It was we had a few speakers and some could make it and some couldn't. But we did hold the survey at the end of our last session, and some of the feedback from yourselves was pointing this out to us. So it is something we're very acutely aware of. And again, maybe this is the self-reflection that should take place as change needs to start at home. And I think going forward, we'll definitely try to be more at least proponents of the diversity agenda in the way we operate, as well as in the way we present in the public space. So we run a monthly pulse report I'm not sure how many of our audience are familiar with the Pulse report, but near the back, we have a responsible investment corner, which we contribute to every month. And this, I think, was the one from roughly November or December last year, speaking about gender equality. So on the map, we have, or essentially the global map, looking at different countries. And this was female representation in terms of national parliament. So South Africa comes across looking really well, actually, a nice green color there. I think we're about 46% of our MPs are female. So in the public space, we've seen fantastic progress. In the private sector, I believe there's still a little bit of room to move. And then on the chart on the right-hand side is just showing you, this was a microcosm, I guess, of Europe in a sense. So Europe are very much leading in the space in terms of drawing targets. I know, and I did a fair bit of work on this a couple of years ago, the European Union were looking to target, I think it was about 40% female representation at the MP level. And it was quite interesting how they got to this 40% number. I think there were a lot of anthropologists and researchers coming together to find what is the sweet spot in terms of how we behave culturally versus what is the ambition of people within our system as well. So it's a very nuanced and very tricky discussion, but they have drawn that line in the sand of 40%. I believe we had a Department of Women, I can't remember what they're called today, but also a few years ago had a similar target in mind. If we were to put South Africa on this map, like I said, we had 46%. We would actually be the second highest in Europe behind only Sweden. And I think tie with, I think it was maybe Andorra and Finland as well, also on that 46% mark. Looking at the private sector, so this is just a select few JSE listed companies. This was in our local Pulse report. There's a good and a naughty corner there. So this was female representation at board level, so at non-executive level. So you can see there are those that have made incredible progress, and Tracy's also done a lot of work on this in terms of highlighting those companies that are saying something in the public space, but the sincere effort is not necessarily taking place internally. But I think it's not always clear when we think about diversity, because it's not just about gender lines, it's obviously demographic as well. And coming in the context of South Africa, this is a very sensitive topic. If we look at, and this is not to pick on, but use Nedbank as an example. So they've set quite progressive goals in terms of their representation. If we put them on their previous chart there, they don't look that fantastic in terms of gender representation. So the board members are about only 20% female. A couple of glaring things there, or at least one of the glaring things, is there's no white females on the board. So although 40% white male, it is 60% historically, I think it's African, colored and Indian representation. But the next level in the discussion, this comes out in our chat with Fudzi later on, is that it's not just about the non-executive, but actually the executive, who's making the strategic decisions within a company, and is it inclusive in that decision making? And if we take a closer look at Nedbank, and this is what we're encouraging the investment world to do, is look also at the executive committee running a company. So here Nedbank are about 30% white male, and then an even split between your white females, your ACI males, and your ACI females. So what may appear on the surface at a non-executive level, I think at an executive level, Nedbank are making decent strides. But again, it's not completely reflective of South Africa society, and they have quite ambitious goals in mind. And I encourage you to go look at their integrated report, which I think was released a couple of weeks ago. So moving on swiftly to our responsible investment research report. Like I mentioned, this is focused on the calendar year 2020. It will be released in the next 2 weeks or so. And just to give a little bit of background in terms of ESG, or environmental, social, and governance investing, these are all fund flows into non-ESG funds over the course of the last 15 years or so. And this will be a product of market performance and also market sentiment in terms of being risk on or risk off. So as we see here clearly, the 2008 and 9 financial crisis, a lot of outflows into funds, and similarly during the COVID lockdown, a substantial amount of outflows. But if we overlay this with the all ESG fund flows, it's completely contrarian. So, we can see here traction really grew after 2015, maybe 2016, in terms of funds going into ESG-focused funds. And incredibly pleasing to note that even during the COVID crisis, if anything, it actually heightened the ESG agenda and really brought home society's engagement, or at least our relationship with the environment and nature. And I think just to comment on the previous slide, so none of our Nedgroup funds actually have the label of being an ESG fund, But through this due diligence process of responsible investment that we do annually, we believe we're doing a sweeping analysis of our funds to make sure as stewards of these funds that they're operating within a responsible investment framework that we are happy and satisfied with. This was the asset management footprint of our survey that we did last year. We still need to crunch the numbers this year, but it will be significantly higher. So what is pleasing here is we're sitting in our offices in Cape Town, Johannesburg, Durban, London, as well as some of the satellite offices, but our footprint is indeed global in terms of the work that we are doing. So our responsible investment review is not at a fund level, but actually at a fund manager level. So here we have responsible investment asset management review. These were the participants that we had. Incredibly pleasing progress. So in 2019, we had 14 local managers and 4 global. So that's within our best of breed, our core, our multi-manager, and our cash solutions range. And then this year, we've had cumulatively 46 managers. So my colleagues and I are sweating it out day and night to get the report done because we are kept incredibly busy by all the responses that we have received. So incredibly pleasing. And this is a combination of us going out to the market, looking at our partner managers to do the due diligence with, as well as going beyond and looking at some of our backup managers, the broader SA asset management universe, as well as the global universe as well. And then secondary to that is after our report last year, very encouragingly, a lot of managers have come to us and said, we would like to be run through your RI screening framework. So just very quickly, some of the high-level results that we've seen come through over the course of the last month or two, and you may have seen this last year in our research report, is to what extent do you believe that ESG factors can impact on an underlying share price? So we've seen quite a pleasant trend here from 2019 to 2020. This was from a rating scale of 1 to 5, being it has very little impact to it has a material impact. So some interesting results here. So environmental has greater weight than social, in the belief that it will impact on a share performance. And of course, governance is very much at the forefront of a lot of asset managers thinking in terms of how they assess a company through the ESG lens. And there is the well-known rhetoric that a company that has strong governance, typically that feeds to the backbone of a company, and you find that the environmental and the social follow suit. Not always the case, but it's very much a starting point for a lot of asset managers, not just locally, but globally as well. And then, to what extent do environmental factors play a role in your investment decisions? And for me, this is the most overwhelmingly pleasing result from our review so far this year. We've seen a complete shift in the curve in the sense in 2019, the majority of respondents said that the environmental factors have a minor to even a fair amount of role in their investment decision-making process. And what we're seeing here in 2020 is this has completely shifted to either having a fair amount of influence or even a major influence. For those that are familiar with the United Nations Principles for Responsible Investing or the Codes for Responsible Investing in South Africa, CRISA, as well as the Regulation 28 of the Pension Fund Act, they speak a lot to the integration of ESG in the investment decision-making process. And this is what we're trying to gauge here from our asset managers. So a pleasing result. And very similarly on the social front as well, we're seeing a shift in the curve. The majority of respondents saying either a fair amount or a major amount of influence in terms of the social factors on your investment decision. And then also on the governance front. I mean, governance has always been quite a high weighting in the way that guys assess companies through an ESG lens. But again, pleasing results in the sense that none of our managers now say that governance has no role in the investment decision. And this is, we like to think, a product and really a goal of our responsible investment drive is to lift all our managers up in terms of where they come in the responsible investment game. We have evolved our assessment this year to include 3 key areas of focus. And those that dialed into our last investment webinar will be familiar with a couple of these that Peter Uhlenbroek and his team at Share Action posited, and we've worked a fair amount with them to evolve our own questionnaire. This was looking to provide the top 3 climate risks or opportunities you have identified and how they inform your investment decisions and your portfolio construction. And we've seen some really pleasing results come through here in terms of looking at climate risks. Some managers have highlighted something like a carbon tax or regulation, other sea level rises, what they could mean for the reinsurance industry. Another area of focus for us was human and labor rights or opportunities to your portfolios. Again, a few of the answers have come through here, particularly in the mining and resources space around health and safety measures. Are CEOs being compensated fairly, or at least incorporating a KPI that is linked to health and safety in the mining space? Some of our global managers have highlighted, and you'll be familiar with the story in terms of the likes of sustainable cotton, the human rights violations you may see with the Uyghurs in China. So some really contentious issues which are incredibly difficult to build into your portfolio analysis, but we are seeing some really nice progress in that space. Have you identified any biodiversity risks or opportunities to your portfolios? And this was something that Peter and his team did posit. It's probably one of the more difficult ones to gauge. Again, we've seen a wide range of spectrum from our managers. A lot of them have not actually progressed to that level of looking at biodiversity risks. Others are fully conscious of the deforestation that takes place given their investments. Some have even cited the sustainable seafood populations. We have hake here off the west coast of Cape Town as well. And some have highlighted what those populations are doing and what they've done over the last sort of 10, 20, 30 years even, and trying to understand that as a risk to the portfolio as well as an opportunity. And then another question in terms of how we've evolved our review this year, and this very much speaks to today, is do you specifically address diversity issues with boards and or executive leadership? This, again, is kind of a tricky one. There's some that are not very well versed in understanding the agenda, and there are those that are incredibly far along in their learning curve. So this is just some of the quick initial responses. So those managers that are engaging companies on diversity was 80% of the respondents, that's of the 46 respondents, said yes, they are. 20% said they aren't. And we appreciate that self-acknowledgement that they haven't started that process, or it's not something they're thinking about, and we hope maybe they do on the back of this review going forward. Of that 80%, like I mentioned, there's quite a broad spectrum. There are those that are saying they're affecting change by voting on directors at AGMs. There are those that are very pleasingly well-versed and articulated in the agenda saying, we believe this board is not representative of the society or community that they operate in. And they look to affect that sort of change by the way they vote, as well as the way they engage with companies. And again, not just at non-executive level, but actually at executive management level as well. Thank you. That's kind of the quick presentation I have on our Responsible Investment Asset Management Review. Please do get in touch with any of your Nedgroup contacts should you like more information on this report. Sustainability as agenda, we're always very open and happy to engage on, so please do get in touch. I believe we do now have the responses from the survey that we put forward at the beginning. So the first question was, are you of the view that greater diversity leads to enhanced strategic decision making? And quite an overwhelming response. I don't think you guys can see it, but 94% of you believe that it does lead to enhanced strategic decision making. So pleasing. And then the remaining 6%, hopefully our discussion later, particularly with Fadzi one day, might dispel some of those notions. The second question was, do you believe your organization is sufficiently diverse along demographic lines? 58% of you said yes, and 42% of you said no. I think it'll be interesting to see where the respondents are from. We have a nice mix of people dialing in from both South Africa and the UK as well. But yeah, a nice admissions to say, yes, our organization is not reflective of society, and we have some work to do in that regard. And then on the third question is, do you believe your organization is sufficiently diverse along gender lines? This one was slightly more positive. 63% of you said yes, and 38% of you said no. So we still have a fair amount of work to do in terms of gender representation across the board. And then the final question, these are all equally important. I was going to say this one has the most weight, but that's not necessarily the case, is do you believe your organization benefits from inclusion in its decision making? Similar to the gender question, about 68% of you said yes, that you do benefit from inclusion in your decision making, and 32% of you say no, it doesn't. And I think this is probably also a consequence of your organization, the type of operation you're running and the size that you're running at. But encouragingly, I think those 32% who believe that it doesn't benefit can self-reflect. And even those 68% of you that say that you do benefit, it'll be interesting to run a poll amongst your own employees and see if they agree with you and do some work. And I think that's why we brought in somebody like Fadzi later today, who is a strategist, and she has consulted historically on diversity and inclusion. I'm pretty much spot on my time, so I'm going to cut it there for now. We do have a very short clip, and when we return, we'll have Tracy Davies joining us for about a 20-minute Q&A session. Thank you.